Something is different about Iran's new leader, and nobody's connecting the dots. A man just inherited control of a country at war. And his first move shocked every government on earth. But here's the thing. This is not just another leadership change. I mean, you have seen new leaders take power before, but this one is different. This time, the person who just took over walked into a shopping mall without a single bodyguard, while his country was firing missiles, and then canceled every nuclear agreement Iran had ever signed. On the same day, the one person the whole world was negotiating with is gone. And the one who replaced him just said, "The nuclear bomb is our right, non-negotiable, forever." Let that sink in. But what does this actually mean for the conflict? And why are world leaders already saying they are going to miss the old era, even though the old leader was considered one of the most difficult figures in modern geopolitics? Well, let me explain. Disclaimer. Let us start with that image, because it matters more than it looks. Earlier today, footage began circulating of Iran's new supreme leader, Mojtaba Khamenei, son of the previous supreme leader who was killed in strikes earlier in this conflict, walking through a shopping mall in Tehran. The mall was decorated with Palestinian flags, and he was completely alone in terms of security. No visible protection, standing in a queue, making a purchase like any ordinary person. Now, you might think that is a small detail, but think about the context for a second. This man just inherited leadership of a country that is actively at war. His own father was just killed. The United States and Israel are conducting strikes, and he is walking through a public mall without security in full view of everyone. There are two ways to read that. The first is that it is a deliberate message to his own population. I'm not afraid, I'm with you, I'm one of you. The second is that it reflects a level of confidence that is either extraordinary or deeply alarming, depending on where you sit. Either way, it tells you immediately that this is not a man who is rattled. And it tells you that whoever thought the change in leadership would create confusion or hesitation on Iran's side may have miscalculated badly. Because within hours of that shopping trip, the decisions being made from Tehran were anything but hesitant. But first, who exactly is this person? And why are senior officials around the world already saying publicly that the world is going to miss the previous era? Here is what analysts and officials have been saying today, and it is worth paying attention to. Mojtaba Khamenei is described by those who follow Iranian politics closely as significantly more hardline than his father. That is not a small thing to say. His father was not exactly known for compromise, but multiple reports today quoted officials saying, in almost identical words, that the world will miss the era of his father. Think about what it means when experienced observers, people who have watched this conflict for decades, look at a new leader and say that the previous one, the one who just died in a military strike, was actually the more moderate option. And then Mojtaba Khamenei made his first public statement, and it removed any remaining doubt about the direction things are heading. His exact words, as reported, "The United States and Israel only understand the language of combat, and we will deal with them accordingly. No more diplomacy." That is a significant statement in any context. But in this context, a live conflict, active missile exchanges, a global energy crisis already underway, it lands differently. It is not a negotiating position. It is a declaration of intent. And for the people in Washington, in Brussels, in Riyadh, who have spent years trying to find some diplomatic path through this, that statement closed a door. Drop a comment right now. Did you even know Iran had a new supreme leader? Because most people scrolling the news today have absolutely no idea this transition happened. Tell me below. Now we get to the part that should be the headline on every news channel on Earth today, but is not. Within hours of taking power, Mojtaba Khamenei reportedly made a decision regarding Iran's nuclear program. He canceled all international agreements related to halting it. Every agreement, every understanding, every framework that the previous leadership had, however reluctantly, signed or acknowledged. All of it gone. And in its place, a declaration. Possessing nuclear weapons is a sovereign right of Iran. It is not open to negotiation. It is not a matter for other countries to decide. It belongs to Iran alone. Now, let me explain why this matters so much for people who are not following this closely. For years, the entire framework of diplomacy around Iran has been built on one central idea. Keep Iran from building a nuclear weapon. Every negotiation, every sanction, every deal, every threat, every agreement, all of it was designed to prevent that one outcome. The previous leadership negotiated. They signed things. They allowed inspectors in. They gave things up in exchange for sanctions relief. They were difficult and they pushed back constantly, but they were at least engaged with the framework. The new leader just stepped out of the framework entirely. One commentary circulating today put it in a single sentence that is worth repeating. They killed the one who was negotiating. So the one who builds the bomb has arrived. Read that again, because it captures something that 10 paragraphs of analysis cannot. The entire strategic logic of this conflict, from the perspective of those who launched it, was built on the assumption that removing the current leadership would create an opening for something better, a more moderate successor, a regime that was weakened enough to negotiate on worse terms. Instead, the opposite happened. The leadership that replaced the old one is more hardline, more defiant, and has now publicly declared that the one concession the whole world cared about most, no nuclear weapon, is completely off the table. And it did not stop there. Because while all of that was happening at the leadership level, the transition, the declaration, the nuclear announcement, the war itself was simultaneously escalating in a way that even analysts who have been tracking this closely described as unexpected. Today marked what was reported as the 37th wave of Iranian attacks. And this wave was different in scale. Iran launched what were described as one-ton warhead missiles, a 3-hour continuous missile barrage. Not a strike, not an exchange. 3 hours of sustained fire. For context on what that means practically, air defense systems are designed to handle bursts. A sustained 3-hour wave is not just a military challenge, it is an economic one. Every interceptor missile fired costs millions. 3 hours of interceptions burns through resources at a rate that is genuinely difficult to sustain. And then came the announcement that took this beyond a military conflict into something that touches every corner of the global economy. Iran declared that it would now operate on what it called an eye for an eye principle on infrastructure. Their exact position. If the enemy wages an infrastructure war, we will target their infrastructure in return. And then, shortly after, a list emerged of what Iran now considers legitimate targets. Not military bases, not defense installations, technology companies. Specifically named Microsoft, Google, Nvidia, Oracle, IBM, Palantir. Think about what that means for a moment. These are not abstract military targets. These are the companies that run the digital infrastructure of the modern world, the cloud services that businesses depend on, the systems that hospitals use, the networks that financial institutions operate on. Whether this is a credible threat or a psychological pressure tactic is something analysts are debating right now, but the fact that it was stated publicly, officially, on the same day the nuclear deal was canceled, that combination of signals is not accidental. Tell me in the comments, does it surprise you that Google and Microsoft just got named as war targets? Because when I saw that list, I had to check it 3 times. Drop your reaction below. And now here's the part that, when you put it next to everything we have just covered, becomes genuinely alarming. Today, a United States senator came out of a 2-hour classified military briefing and shared, carefully, without disclosing classified details, what he was able to say publicly. And what he described was a picture that does not match the confident statements being made in press conferences. Here is what he was able to share. First, the stated goal of this conflict is not, and apparently never was, to eliminate Iran's nuclear program. This despite the fact that this has been publicly cited repeatedly as the central justification. The senator described himself as surprised by this, as in, even after the briefing, he found it surprising. Second, regime change is also not on the table, which means the leadership that just canceled the nuclear deal and declared no more diplomacy is expected to remain in power when this is over. Third, the actual goals, as described, are destroying missiles, boats, and drone factories. And when the senator asked what happens when bombing stops and production restarts, the answer he received was more bombing, which means the answer to the question of how this ends is, it does not. Not cleanly, not soon. And then the fourth point, the one he described as unforgivable because it was completely foreseeable. On the Strait of Hormuz, the waterway that a significant portion of the world's energy supply passes through, the waterway that has already been disrupted, the waterway that is causing fuel shortages in countries thousands of miles from this conflict, there is no plan, no strategy, no roadmap for getting it safely reopened. A separate analysis shared today summarized the situation this way. The U.S. got pushed into this conflict and now cannot get out of it without significant embarrassment. Because once the bombing stops, production lines can be rebuilt. And the leadership that was supposed to collapse has not only survived, it has become more hardline. So you have a new, more radical leader, a canceled nuclear deal, an escalating war, named threats against global tech infrastructure, and a classified briefing that reveals there is no clear exit. That is where things stand today. Now let us zoom out from the military and diplomatic details and talk about what all of this actually means for ordinary people. Because this is no longer a story that stays contained to the region. The U.S. Navy today was reported to be refusing requests from oil companies and shipping operators for escorts through the Strait of Hormuz. The reason given? Too dangerous. The Navy that is supposed to keep global shipping lanes open is itself declining to operate there right now. A Thai ship was struck in the strait today. Not a military vessel. A commercial ship from a country that has nothing to do with this conflict. A reminder that the disruption is not theoretical. Warnings were issued today to civilians in Bahrain, the UAE, and Kuwait to stay at least 1 kilometer away from any U.S.-linked banks in their countries. Think about the practical reality of that warning for a person living in Dubai or Manama. You're going about your daily life, and you receive a message telling you to stay away from banks. And the context for all of this is a conflict that the people running it have just admitted in a classified briefing that was partially described publicly. They do not have a clear plan to end energy prices, shipping costs, supply chains, digital infrastructure. All of it is connected to what is happening right now. And the decision made today by Iran's new leader to cancel every nuclear agreement and declare the bomb a sovereign right just made the path to any resolution significantly longer and more complicated. Where are you watching from? Because this is already affecting fuel prices and shipping costs in countries far from the conflict. I read every single comment. Tell me your country below and whether you are already feeling this. And here is where things stand tonight. Iran has a new supreme leader. He went shopping without security while missiles flew. He declared no more diplomacy within hours of taking power. He canceled every nuclear agreement his country had ever signed. He named Google, Microsoft, and Nvidia as legitimate targets. And he oversaw the 37th wave of attacks, a 3-hour missile barrage, all on the same day. At the same moment, a classified briefing leaked out of Washington revealing that there's no plan to destroy the nuclear program, no plan for regime change, and no plan to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. And as a final detail that did not get nearly enough attention today, North Korea officially announced its support for Iran as new supreme leader. The world that existed 2 weeks ago, where there was at least a diplomatic framework, where there was at least a conversation happening about nuclear limits, where there was at least a leader on the other side who would pick up the phone. That world is gone. The person everyone was negotiating with is gone. The person who replaced him has made one thing perfectly clear. He is not interested in talking. But what is your opinion on this? Comment down below. If you're curious to find more, then make sure to click on one of the videos you see on the screen. And with that, we come to the end of this video. If you enjoyed this video, then turn on the notifications bell on this channel. Also, please share this video with as many people as possible. Let's get this news out there.